Okay, so we have a new episode of Legends and Leaders, and today it's great to have Neil here. Neil, you're somebody who's been so transformative to the world of SEO, digital marketing for a long time. I mean, you really helped pave the way for a lot of the top SEO strategies that brands have adopted, that just individuals have adopted through blogging and other areas. And you've also created a bunch of different tools that have been very useful, such as one that's focusing on like suggesting the kind of best ways for you to understand SEO, and you've just been putting out content that's been very helpful to people. I've read your content. I know a lot of other people have. So I'm excited to have you and to get into your story.
Thanks. Thanks for having me.
Awesome. So you're just going back to the beginning. How did your passion for digital marketing, SEO, wanting to be like this kind of guru in this space and be a thought leader? How did that passion begin?
Yeah, so never really at the beginning had a passion to be a thought leader.
Uh-huh.
Never tried to intentionally get into SEO. It was back in the day when I was 16, I was looking for a high paying job and I couldn't find one. And as I was browsing these job websites, I noticed that a lot of them were publicly traded and they were making hundreds of millions of dollars. And I was like, you know what? If I create a job website and I make 1% of what they do, I'll be rich. So I found some people on this forum called Web Hosting Talk back in the day. I don't even know if it exists. Found some developers. They created a website and then it launched and no one came to my job board. I was like, oh, what's up with this? And then I realized that you got to do something called marketing. So saved some more money, paid a few marketing firms, got little to no results, was frustrated, was broke. So I had to learn it on my own. I got decent at it, started getting more traffic, but then I still wasn't making any money. And being Indian and a book nerd, I was like, you know what? I'm just going to go to college to get a degree and go get a job like at a Microsoft or something like that. So then I started taking nighttime college classes when I was still 16 at a community college. My first class was Speech 101. I gave a speech on how Google's algorithm works, and someone in there's like, I work for a power supply manufacturer. We're looking for someone who does what you do. And keep in mind, back then it was more rare. So then got a contract with them. They paid me 5 grand a month, drove around 20, 25 million a year in sales. So they were ecstatic. Now, I wasn't driving all the sales. I was driving the leads. The salespeople were closing the leads, and then, they had to service it. I was doing so well for him, the owner of that company told his son about us. His son owned an ad agency at the time called Tonic LA. And he introduced us to Blue Cross, Blue Shield, Countrywide, which is now Bank of America, I believe, and ING Direct. So his son was just like, hey, I'll just give you 5 grand per client and we'll handle the client. You just do some of the work. So I was being 16, 20 grand a month. It was adding up really fast. And that's how I got my start.
And so you were just kind of developing your own strategies initially. Like, what were kind of some of the ways you figured out how to get that 20, 25 million sales?
I was just ranking sites on Google for terms that were lucrative within their vertical. I was optimizing the site for conversion, so then that way those visitors would turn into leads, and then I would send it off to, their sales team and it would plug into their CRM. The big difference is as I wanted to scale the agency, I had to figure out how to generate my own leads and traffic. So I started doing for myself what I was doing for my clients, and I unintentionally built up a somewhat of a small personal brand, and I unintentionally started building a following, and that's how that came about. And I enjoy teaching, but there was never a goal to build up a personal brand.
Mhm. And so at the time when you were starting to develop your own following, were you thinking like, oh, just kind of get more clients from this? And now it's shifted into speaking and into other things. Like how did that start to like develop into something else?
Yeah, so over the years, I thought I would get a lot of clients from it. It did help get clients, but not necessarily the right type of clients. When you're looking for like big enterprise clients like a IBM or Apple, they don't care if you're Neil Patel and you're writing tons of articles. They go through procurement and have all these checks and balances, and they're just like, will we look bad if Neil screws up? That is literally one of the questions they ask themselves, right? And it's not necessarily Neil, will we get fired for hiring WPP or Dentsu or Omnicom or Publicis? Usually no. So they look at taking a risk on their careers hiring someone who is a personal brand. If you're a corporate brand with a lot of similar logos and tons of employees and a track record, they're less likely to really have to worry about taking that risk on you and looking bad if something wrong happens because they don't want to lose their job. And over the years, I started getting speaking engagements and paid speaking engagements, and then you start getting 10 grand, 20 grand, goes up to 50, then 100 sometimes. You're like, oh, this isn't bad. And then you get a lot of them where people ask you to speak once or twice a week, and then it becomes not manageable when you have a family. But then over the years, what we learned is the conferences that pay us to speak most of the time do not have our ideal customers. So what we
Oh,
started doing is we'll speak at the ones that are paid that are the right fit. Majority are not, because the money's great, but it's not necessarily the right long-term fit. And on the flip side, what we really do is we go out there and we pitch to speak at the conferences that are the right fit. And a lot of times they won't pay for flight or airfare and no speaking fees, and we'll eat the expense. Let's call it 10 grand per event, right, for flights and stuff. But it's generating long-term revenue and much more profitability than charging a 50 grand speaking fee.
hmm. So you're willing to kind of bite the bullet a little bit there.
Yeah, we're always willing to make short-term sacrifices for long-term gains. And
Hmm.
when we really know it's long-term gains, like to give you an example of this, we started this model out in Canada first, all right? And it was unintentional because the Canada leaders like, we can't get you paid, but we're just gonna get you to the right events. So I was like, all right, let's try this out for a year. Did it for a year and we started getting RFPs. Did it for almost 2 years and we're like, huh, this is really working. We're getting in pitches for 3, 4, $5 million pitches. So then we started rolling out the playbook globally and be like, this works, let's do it. And we're willing to sacrifice the short term revenue because we know long term it really does pay off. And the reason I break down that example is a lot of people are like, yeah, I'm willing to lose in the short run to make more in the long run, but they don't really know if something's going to pay off in the long run and they haven't tested it out or they don't have data. What we do is before we're willing to make that sacrifice, we want to really make sure long term it'll really pay off. Because if you are eating all these expenses in the short run and then in the long run it doesn't pay off, you got hit twice.
Right. So, Neil, you figured out how to get incredible clients. Like at a point, I think you've been at work with LinkedIn, Champion, ESPN, a lot of big name clients. How did you start to like break into that? I mean, you mentioned earlier what they were looking for from you, but how did you start to get the connection and then actually onboard them and get the results they wanted?
But what really helped is we hired amazing people who worked at competitors.
Mm.
So then when they were working on big accounts like Champion or Procter and Gamble or Unilever or Sony or whatever it may be, a lot of these employees within these companies hop around and they go to other large corporations. So then they go to this new company and they're like, yeah, we need a market person. Oh, I used to work with Mike at iProspect. Let me hit him up. Oh, Mike's not at iProspect anymore. He's at this new agency. I had a great experience with him and, Nick and Nikki. Oh, they're all at this new company. Let's see if they can just do the job for us because we had a great experience with those people in the past. That is how we generate most of our business.
So you get the right people with previous good track records.
Yes, people hire people.
Yeah, makes sense. It's also smart. It's a good strategy. So
Expensive strategy, but it works.
yeah. So we talked a little bit about like the content you create. You've been doing content you've been consistent for years and years and years with content. What are some of like the best practices you've found that's been really effective to get the kind of customer base that you really want?
You have to be consistent, not for a year or two. I'm talking about 3+ years. It's all about following up. So when you create these pieces of content, it's not just about following with the leads, it's about responding to comments, engaging to emails, even if they're not a lead, and building their relationships. And four, leverage multiple formats. Some people prefer video, some people prefer audio like podcasts, some people prefer blog posts. But when you start doing all those kind of things, it helps. And the fifth one is get very technical with your content. The more specific you get, the more likely you are to get your ideal customer from it because you're getting very specific and then people can see you're really an expert versus just being really generic and broad like everyone else.
Hmm. And you said like 3 years. So like what kind of results were you getting within the first 3 years that that you were still motivated enough to keep going?
Not a ton. I was getting some traction and seeing some revenue. I really saw results like within year 6 or 7. And most people don't want to play the long game.
Mhm.
And when I say within first 3 years, yeah, you make more than $1 million from it, but like it was hard to build a business that's like 10, 20, 100+ million in annual revenue when you're really creating content for 3 years. It's not hard to get to a million. It's hard to really scale into the 8+ figures. But if you just consistently do it, it works over time and you'll build up a massive following that's loyal.
Mhm. And how much has like content creation changed today since when you were beginning? Like, what have you had to do different?
Oh, a lot. When I first started, it was mainly just text. Now people want video, then short form video, and audio is a big one for like podcasting. But video and audio, I didn't have to go in front of a camera for like the first 10 plus years I was creating content. Now I do. And even if you recorded the content 10 plus years ago, no one put it online. Like very rarely.
Hmm. And you were comfortable with that change? You were ready to embrace it?
Yeah.
That's great. So you talk some of this content you put out, and some of the things you talk about is like the importance of data and using like data to drive decision making, and like the science that goes really behind the marketing and the SEO. Like what are some of the easiest ways that kind of brands are just missing out on from an SEO perspective that you can apply some of the stuff you've learned to that, and really change them around right away?
So one, the majority of the brands that get tons of traffic don't necessarily create new content. Percentage of the time they do, but they actually spend the majority of the time, 60+% from what we're seeing, updating their content.
Mm,
Two, the big thing that we're seeing from an SEO standpoint, people just focus on writing long content instead of just answering someone's questions as quick as possible. And the longer tail queries you go after, the better you're doing with the AI overviews, right? Because Google has all these AI responses now. Three, site speed really matters. More people search on mobile devices than desktop computers. It wasn't that way when I first started, but it is now. And four, you got to do all the little things good, like on page code. You got to build links. You got to create amazing images and graphics. You got to do omni-channel marketing because branding really matters with SEO. But you got to do all these little things correctly and well. If you're missing a few of them, it's hard to rank. It's like a all or none game these days.
mhm. And are brands willing generally to really make some of these changes? Because sometimes they can be slow moving, and like some of these are more drastic changes.
Yeah, brands are willing to make the changes because they want the results. So brands usually don't look at it as this is a lot of changes. They look at it as how much revenue can I potentially make or how much revenue am I losing to my competition? And if you can make a business use case, it's really easy to get people to make changes. Doesn't mean it's gonna be happen fast. It can still take a long time for a brand to make the change, but they're usually willing to do it if there's a business case and you can show them ROI.
Mhm. Yeah, that definitely makes sense. And I mean, anyone would be inclined to update stuff to get more revenue for sure.
Yeah.
So you were named Neil. Obama named you as a top 100 entrepreneur under 30. What did that feel like?
Honestly, it's great, but like it doesn't mean much. And I'm not trying to throw shade on Obama or say anything that he's bad or good or anything like that. It's more so awards don't mean that you're going to end up closing more revenue or business. And it was more so an organization called MPAC that was working on behalf of the White House, and they were just companies submitted and it was based on revenue and growth, and they just picked them. It's just like just being super transparent. I didn't do anything special to deserve the award. I just had a company that was growing fast enough and had enough revenue.
Mhm. We also got the top 10 marketer by Forbes. You've got a bunch of other awards too. So you're doing something right.
Yes, and but the reason I want to talk about how these awards don't mean much is you can have all the awards in the world, doesn't mean you're gonna make money. It's just like the other day, someone was telling me, "Dude, Cristiano Ronaldo is so popular. He's amazing. Look at the brand he's built." And I'm like, "I'd rather own Sensora." And they're like, "What's Sensora?" I'm like, "It's a company that does over 200 billion a year." And they're like, "What? I've never heard of it." I'm like, "Exactly. Just because you're the most recognized person down the street, and he's done an amazing job at personal branding, way better than me, it doesn't mean you're going to be successful." Now, of course, usually if your brand's big enough like his, you are going to make money in something, and he's done very well. But what I'm getting at is there's a lot of people who make way more money that no one ever knows or talks about, and they don't have tons of awards. And at the end of the day, in the business world, that's really all that matters.
Yeah, you're definitely right. I mean, I know of some people that we recently had a guest on who did over 2 billion sales in the cosmetic space, and like not as well recognized, not that known, but was able to do that. Doesn't have all these awards necessarily.
Yeah, and it was funny before we started this interview, you mentioned you were interviewing someone I know named Patty, and we used to live in the same community. Not a lot of people know Patty. Very successful businesswoman. She doesn't have the notoriety as a Kardashian. Super successful though.
Yeah.
Her business has done really well. Would you rather have notoriety or would you rather have a business that does well? I'd rather be the Patty and have a business that does extremely well. That's just me. Some other people may prefer the notoriety. And Patty's done a good job of building her brand over the years. But she's more importantly, she's built an amazing company and employs a ton of people, right? I'd rather have that.
Yeah. So, do you think creating personal brand is like essential today and important? Like, does everyone need to do it?
No, you don't. I prefer the Nike approach. We're just going to go rent the personal brands and pay them to promote our business. I'd rather, instead of being Jordan, which is one of the biggest personal brands, I'd rather be Nike that pays Jordan.
Because just is it just because it's easier?
It's more scalable. You can get Jordan, you can get LeBron James, you can get Kobe Bryant, although he passed away. You can get any of the latest celebrities.
So you can always just keep grabbing these different distribution points, and you're not just
Bingo.
one.
Exactly.
Hmm. So you
It's like why be a king when you can be a kingmaker?
mhm, right. There's also just
Kings
so many
kings
of the
come and go, brands come and go, right? Personal ones as people pass away. But what's better is being the kingmaker and continually putting people in place and reaping the rewards year after year.
right, and they have a structure too that's set up for just bring new talent and figure out how to monetize.
Correct.
So you Neil, you also have launched a series of different tools. One being Uber Suggest. That's I think a lot of people have really liked because it's like you kind of understand what your competitors are doing, and you can figure out more for yourself of what strategies you should change based on that. What goes into like actually operating that? Why did you want to launch it?
Can you repeat the question again? You cut out a little bit on my end.
Yeah, so you created a tool that gives you an insight into like what your competitors do from an SEO standpoint, so you can tweak your own SEO and your own rankings. What made you want to actually democratize this type of tool because it could be pretty powerful for you to just have this insight on your own and then give that to your own clients.
Lead generation. Give away a lot of stuff for free. You'll collect a lot of visitors, corporations using your products, or people using your products. You collect a lot of leads. You can sell them on other services.
So it's just all about building the brand basically, and then in this ecosystem you have.
Correct. Yes.
And what went into actually making that tool?
A lot of engineers, a lot of feedback from potential users and users, a lot of market research, and probably spent $3-ish million over, I don't know how, before it started making its first dollar in revenue.
How long did that take?
It was iterations over like a year, year and a half.
That's not too long.
No, it's not long at all. People need to start thinking about 10 plus year outlooks in the business world instead of 5 year outlooks or even 2 or 3 year outlooks.
Yeah, I mean today everything's just so instant gratification, so it's kind of hard to do.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, I think you've done a bunch of like digital marketing, like ad work too, as well. Like, what would you say are some of like the like kind of best practices today that brands should do from a communication standpoint when they're creating digital marketing and just ads?
Sure. So what we're finding like 10 plus years ago, high produced ads like Super Bowl style did really well. Now people just busting out their phones and recording and making it an ad and just being more authentic converts way better from what we're seeing. So people want that authenticity. Um, Two, you got to try novel new stuff. Like just doing the same old stuff that everyone else is doing doesn't work as well. A great example of this is Coinbase ran a Super Bowl commercial a few years ago and it was just a QR code on the television screen. It broke their site. It was that popular. Three, celebrities don't have the same cachet that they used to. Everyone's doing celebrities. So you gotta, like, when people zig, you gotta zag. Four, use the technology out there. Like if you're running ads, let's say on Google, Google has Performance Max. But use these AI technologies, combine it with humans, and you should be able to maximize revenue even more than if you just rely solely on the technology, because sometimes the technology optimizes for what they're looking for and kind of like what you're looking for. But if you have humans in the loop, you can optimize for both. And I'll give you a great example with Google Performance Max. A lot of agencies found that it doesn't perform as well. Well, what Google thinks is a good lead, you may not. So as a human, what our team started doing is, let's say in B2B, we would start removing all the crappy leads and not pass it as a conversion. And all the good leads, we would instantly fire it as a conversion on Google's end. And they're like, oh, this is a good lead. Yeah, and then they optimize for the good stuff and they don't optimize for the bad stuff.
Mm. And how do you see AI? Like you just mentioned, one way it's changing things a bit, but how do you see overall AI changing the landscape of digital marketing, SEO, and just building a brand?
I think everyone's going to have an AI assistant. It's going to help people get more done faster. I don't see it in its current state or in the state in the next year or so just fully replacing humans, but I do see it helping make things go further and further and people becoming more efficient.
But it's not going to replace any humans.
Depends on what industry, but in marketing, I think some sectors it can replace some humans, but for majority of them, it won't because marketing is really all about creativity.
Mhm.
And I haven't seen AI do a good job of creativity yet. Now, 5 years from now, the technology could be amazing, and sure, maybe it can, but if everyone's using the same technology and doing the same thing, how are you going to stand out?
Right. Yeah. I mean, even like you look at like ChatGPT prompts and what it gives back to you, like some of it's a little cookie cutter. And like that
A
just
lot of
isn't
it's cookie cutter. And
yeah.
some of it is factually off. So you take both those issues and then you're like, all right, can't use this.
Yeah. But people seem to like how well it's written. But I think that there's an authenticity piece to just the human touch too and from writing it.
Exactly.
Yeah. So of all the campaigns you've worked on, Neil, what was some like a campaign that really surprised you in its results, and what was your favorite campaign just in general?
Yeah, so we still work with them, but we recently did a campaign with UTI, University of Technical Institute. They have local college campuses all around the United States. And what we did is we used AI to do research of all the cities around their campus. And we gave it specific prompts on what research we wanted it to perform. We then sent it to a human. We were able to craft articles uh, at massive scale, human written though, and we made it flow and work. Posted it up, and the traffic increases on those local pages were more than a 200% increase. So it was a really cool, fun campaign. And using AI in a more creative way, because most people are like, oh, yeah, we're just going to have AI write everything for you. Well, the quality isn't that great, and the traffic results aren't that good. But when you have it do specific tasks for you, and you still involve humans, you can get great results. You just got to be creative.
Yeah, that is a different approach there.
Yeah.
And yeah, so you took advantage of kind of maximizing things with AI, but still the human touch was a very core element.
It was. And we've tried similar experiments without humans, and it just doesn't work as well from a results perspective.
That's fascinating. So, what do you want to accomplish now, Neil? Like, what are some short term goals you have, long term goals? Like, what's your big picture vision at this point?
We're just spending our time growing, acquiring more companies, and doing the same old thing over and over again and having fun doing it.
Mhm. Yeah, and what do you want to teach now? Like, what are some areas that you haven't really explored yet from a teaching standpoint?
More about AI marketing, more about social media marketing, more about paid advertising, but um, eventually teach more about growing through mergers and acquisitions.
Hmm. Yeah, I mean, those are all areas that are pretty hot. So I'm sure they'll work out.
Hopefully, it'll be fun either way.
Yeah. Well, Neil, that was all the questions that I had. I appreciate you taking the time and doing this. I think you've already been such an important voice in the marketing space for a long time, and I know you're going to continue to be that and to give people like real good, valuable insights that they need to optimize their businesses, get more sales, and I'm sure that will give you a lot of leads continuing forward. So, wishing you much success and thanks for doing this.
Thanks for having me.